Hey, welcome tonight to Commander's Gridiron. We're going to talk about new food, a new stadium name, a new Sean Taylor statue. We're going to recap the Bucks game. We're going to preview the Giants game for week 2. We're going to talk about so much more. Let's podcast about it. Good evening once again, and welcome to Commander's Gridiron. I'm your host, Steve Lockman, where we talk about everything on the field, off the field, Washington Commanders. And trust me, since we've been off the air for a little bit, we got no shortage of stuff to talk about, both on the field and off the field. First off, I want to apologize for last week. Had some technical difficulties, kept us from coming on and streaming. Got it all figured out. Here we are tonight, live for you all to participate and talk about our great team, the Washington Commanders. So let's jump right into it. We're going to talk about some off the field stuff. And as you see the bright green bar scrolling across the bottom of your screen, you're going to see the topics that are coming up tonight here at Commander's Gridiron. So you can kind of keep track of what we did talk about, what we're going to talk about. Feel free to chime in that comment section. We love comments. We love questions. We love comments, interactions. Whether you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch, drop a comment. We'll interact. We'll have some fun tonight, and we'll keep the show going. So as always, we typically start our show with some off-the-field news. And something that kind of made news right before the beginning of the season, actually like in the last week of the preseason, was Josh Harris's steak sale. No, we're not talking about the nice juicy meats. We're actually talking about the fact that even though Josh Harris is the majority owner of the Washington Commanders, he's also held a minority ownership of the Pittsburgh Steelers, something that, a lot of people didn't know about, something that never really made news, even throughout the sale of the team to Harris and Company and all of the minority partners that he had coming into his ownership group. But per adhering to NFL rules, it does prohibit cross ownership by majority owners of teams within the same professional sport. So therefore, he had to sell his stake, which was acquired with his limited partner David Blitzer, who is part of the Philadelphia sports group that owns the 76ers, the New Jersey Devils, and a couple other entities. And basically, it accounted for roughly 5% of the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise that was recently valued in total as $4.63 billion. So obviously, when Harris purchased the Commanders in July of 2023 for a little over $6 billion, price that was a record for an NFL franchise, he therefore had to sell his 5% stake of his ownership of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Moving right along as we talk about new. One of the things that, Josh Harris and Company, as well as some of the other limited partners, Mitchell Rales, Mark Ein, Magic Johnson, et cetera, and it goes right down the line, talked about was new amenities for FedEx Field. It's already come out that, hey, lo and behold, they're going to be in the stadium until probably realistically 2029, 2030 is when the new stadium might be built. I think a lot of that has to do with the federal process and bureaucratic red tape that the team's going to have to cross and jump through to get back to RFK, the complex, right outside of 395, right? If they were seriously looking at considering where they are in Largo, Maryland, or possibly moving into Northern Virginia, closer to team headquarters in Ashburn, there wouldn't necessarily be that much of a delay in designing the stadium, construction of the stadium. I mean, we're seeing new stadiums being built in Buffalo, Nashville, and a couple others, that are 2 to 3 year projects. Right now, they were in the planning stages for a year or two before that, but maybe that realistically does put them in that 29 to 30 window. But I think this also leads them out to taking, the process and the better option for land back at RFK. So in the meantime, they've thrown a ton of money back into Landover and what is now Northwest Stadium, which we're going to talk about in a couple minutes. But one of the things they've done is they've added some new club suites called the 1932 Club. They have, which is basically a new opportunity for season ticket holders to get closer to the players than ever before. They've also introduced something called the brand new Field Level Tunnel Club, which is actually basically kind of like a club level setting in and around the tunnel of the player entrances coming out onto the field. Looks really cool in the pictures. And some of the stuff that you get with that is kind of really cool as well. Don't even want to know what the price tag is for that, but it kind of is what it is, right? And of course, the Commanders say the upgrades aren't all for big spenders. A lot of it is just physical upkeep, paint, refreshing floors, new carpets, new flooring, back seats and bottoms, general maintenance of the stadium. They replaced a large section of the club level seating last year. And 2 years ago, going into 2 seasons, they started doing half of them. They did the other half last season. So, look, it's just about basically putting a glorified Band-Aid on a stadium for another 5 years. But it's something that's been greatly needed for them, right? So kind of as we talk about new, one of the things that popped up and was, with Josh Harris going into the beginning of the season was, hey, look, let's talk about the team name, right? Josh Harris basically says, hey, look, we get it. We understand that the Commander's name may not be taking hold and is struggling to grasp among the fan base, but it doesn't matter. The old name can't come back. And, as much as people were pushing and shouting and kind of doing the kicking and screaming of a toddler to get the Redskins name and logo back, hey, look, it's not coming back. So the first objective is we've got to win football games. That's what Harris said. I totally agree with that. Look, one of the things that winning does is winning cures a lot of things. And trust me, if you start having thrown a couple of winning seasons back to back, make a playoff push or two, nobody's going to care that it's not the Redskins anymore and the Commander's name will take hold. So we kind of know that, right? And says the name debate is going to keep going, even while they try to bring back fans and find the new stadium. But the new name, new rebrand isn't at the top of their list. They got other pressing issues, which quite frankly, can't blame them, right? About into week 2/3 of the preseason, it was actually announced that the Washington Commanders partnered with Northwest Federal Credit Union to announce an exclusive naming rights agreement for the team stadium, formerly known as FedEx Field. The team will usher in the new era at Northwest Stadium for September 15th, week 2 home opener, which is this coming Sunday against the New York Football Giants. As Paul says, hey, buddy, I don't think investing on a box of Band-Aids to FedEx Field makes it better. So it's so many issues, right? Now Northwest Stadium. And it's interesting because, as we talk about two things that you bring up, right? First, the Band-Aid fixes of, a stadium. And while it's super nice that the ownership knows that a new stadium is on the horizon somewhere in some capacity, you kind of got to still take care of what you got, right? Something that former owner Dan Snyder never really did for the last, let's be honest, like 5 to maybe even 10 years. We'll say 5 to 7, easy. Letting stuff go, water, plumbing issues, maintenance, parking lots, you name it, something that a lot of people don't really think about until it starts going bad. And then they kind of see the effects of that, whether it's in, the pregame tailgating, whether it's in the fan experience or lack thereof, the amenities when they're going into the building, whether it's food, whether it's restrooms, whether it's, seating itself or stuff like that. So look, if you want to put a good product on the field, you also have to put out a good product off the field. And I think, the ownership group needs to be congratulated, at least to some level, for taking that stance to at least acknowledge that there's a lot of shortfalls with the stadium and that, hey, we're willing to put, essentially what is now millions and millions of dollars into the stadium, which is now going to be called for this coming season and future seasons, Northwest Stadium. The Commanders did sign the 8-year stadium agreement, like I said, with Northwest Federal Credit Union. Quite honestly, even working in the DC area for the last 23, 24 years, I've never really heard of Northwest Federal Credit Union. It's not like one of the big ones or, one of the big banking financial institutions, nationally or even like on the East Coast, even in the Mid-Atlantic to like the DMV. So I'm not quite sure where they partnered with them, but hey, look, it's another way to get revenue coming in and, move on from the nomenclature and the stigma that was FedEx Field. So it's just another great opportunity for the team as they go forward. Northwest Federal Credit Union put out the statement. They've been an integral part of the community for generations, and we could not be prouder to partner with an organization as committed to the DMV. We continue to work towards our goal of building the Commanders into the elite franchise that consistently competes for championships, and we look forward to working with them as they are excited to welcome us and the fans to Northwest Stadium and creating incredible memories together on the field and in the communities that we serve. And that's kind of one of the things that goes along with it, right? Like, not only do they now own the naming rights to the stadium, but, so you're going to see him at the stadium. You're going to see him on all the advertisements. You're going to hear him on all the advertisements and introductions on TV and blah, 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 blah. But then now it also gets that partnership off the field into the communities that, as much as we may or may not like them to, FedEx did do that as well until everything kind of went sour with their CEO and Dan Snyder. And we know all that history and we're not going to rehash it. So we're going to keep moving on, shall we? One of the things, since we were on our last podcast about 3 weeks ago, and we're actually going to talk about it last week, but we'll mention it super quick because we got other important things to talk about tonight. One of the things that became a shocker to Commanders fans, probably just football fans in general, was that the Commanders decided, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and company, decided that right in the middle of the preseason, towards the end of the season, that we were going to trade our number 2 wide receiver, Jahan Dotson, a local Penn State graduate, to interdivisional rival, the Philadelphia Eagles, and actually send a 2025 5th-round draft pick, and then get back a 2025 3rd-rounder, and then 2 2025 7th-rounder picks. And in all honesty, like, unless you really package the 7th-round picks into something else, which I think they already did with one, basically the 7th-round picks were worthless. I mean, let's just call it as it is and be honest. And so what's kind of interesting with this was, it kind of was never really on anybody's radar that he was going to get traded. There was a lot of talk that he was struggling in camp, wasn't necessarily getting Kingsbury's system down, wasn't really gelling with everybody, not necessarily JD5 and Terry, because he had already played with Terry for a couple of years. But just the fact of, they were trying to get him more reps in the preseason game. I think that was trying to get him more exposure to the Kingsbury offense. But, there's a lot to be said that, hey, look, just in order to get a 3rd-round pick back, we had to throw a 5th round in with it. And then, of all people, it had to go to Philadelphia, which a lot of fans, NFL analysts, and DC media just completely was a head scratcher of why we would even trade this dude into the interdivision. Now, on the flip side, we can honestly say that, while he was our number 2, had an incredible rookie year with like 7 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, ended up getting hurt for about half the season last year, but was looking to have that rebound season as a big slot guy for us with JD5 coming into camp, going into the season. He goes up to Philadelphia as like the number 3, number 4 wide receiver, obviously behind A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Going to use him more in the slot. Not very big dude. I mean, literally, it's like me putting on a Commanders Philadelphia Eagles jersey and going out in there and run, right? If you see pictures of me and him side by side, we're about the same height. He's just a shade taller, but he's a lot faster. So, even in the Eagles debut, I think he had zero targets, 0 catches, 0 yards, which a lot of people were trolling him for getting rid of him. But, it's only going to be a matter of time until he does get some production. Is he going to get the numbers and the stats of, a number 1, number 2? Probably not, but he's probably still going to be enough that he can be a contributing factor to that offense, something that will probably kill us in both games when we play the Philadelphia Eagles. So, for those of you keeping track, who does that leave us for the wide receiver core? Obviously, number one, Terry McLaurin. Number two was Diami Brown out of North Carolina. Had some good chemistry in camp and preseason with JD5. Luke McCaffrey, the rookie, Jamison Crowder, Olamide Zacchaeus, and then we went and picked up Noah Brown from the Houston Texans to fill it up as well. We ended up turning around and releasing right before week 1 game against the Buccaneers, Byron Pringle. So he's no longer there. So it's basically, as we called it, kind of like the wide receiver misfits. Other than Terry McLaurin, a lot of guys that have some NFL experience don't have some NFL experience. We still need a really good number 2, maybe even like a solid number 1 that, as good as Terry is, have made him like the best number 2 in the NFL. Obviously, it didn't work out trying to do the whole Brandon Ayuk thing with the 49ers, turns around, re-signs a contract extension with them for a shit ton of money. But I know that, it was confirmed that at least Peters was talking to San Francisco about it. One of the things that came out, there were 2 of them. I can't remember the second one specifically, but I remember this one. The 49ers actually asked for Terry McLaurin or a first-round draft pick, along with something else, of which Washington is like, look, we're not doing that. So I think that's kind of where it kind of just fell apart from there. So it kind of is what it is, right? And we'll see how the wide receiver group goes from here moving forward. One of the things that, kind of gets brought up with the Dotson trade, because he was a former pick, actually a former first round pick at number 17, 16, if I remember correctly, under the Ron Rivera era, was, hey, how much has his draft picks really hurt us here in DC? And it's super interesting because when you look back at it, essentially 1.5 out of the last 4 first round draft picks are still on the team, right? And we'll explain why I say 1.5. We look at 2020 and we had number 2 overall pick and we took Chase Young out of Ohio State. Chase had a decent to semi-dominant rookie season, won the defensive rookie of the year in 2020, showed promise. However, then towards the end of that season and into the next season, he ended up tearing his ACL, sat out the entire 2021 season and never really was right since, right? And then, as we know, him along with Montez Sweat got traded last season, each for 3rd-round picks. Chase Young went to San Francisco, finished the season out there, and then now he ended up signing with the New Orleans Saints, where he's currently playing, and then Montez Sweat went with the Chicago Bears, respectively. And we kind of know the stuff that the Bears defense is doing. Ron Rivera's second pick, first-round pick in 2021, was Jamin Davis. Jamin Davis is kind of actually starting to show a little bit of promise, a little bit of upswing. Wasn't necessarily succeeding in the linebacker position that we are accustomed to him being in, that he played in out of Kentucky. In that division for college football, he excelled at. But then, him coming to the NFL level and continuing that probably just wasn't the best fit. So Joe Witt, the new defensive coordinator under Dan Quinn, new head coach this season, decided to move Jamin Davis, basically kind of be a hybrid between an edge guy to go in with Armstrong and the other edge dudes, to an outside linebacker, like a quasi outside linebacker with Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, and those guys. So he actually did pretty decent in the preseason under that. Hey, look, learning a new position, learning a whole new defense in the NFL certainly isn't easy. Try and do that in 4 to 6 weeks. Certainly isn't easy on top of it. So I'll say that if he can keep up the pace at which he's going, he'll be good enough to stay where he is, have an impact on defense, and continue probably for another year or 2 at least, right? And they kind of figure out what he's doing long term, contract extension, test free agent market, come back, that kind of deal. Obviously, 2022 first round draft pick was Jahan Dotson, just got traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. We just talked about it. And then last year's first round draft pick, who we picked at number 16, was Emmanuel Forbes. And this is where I say it's kind of the half draft pick, right? When I said we had 1.5 left. Look, it takes incredible talent just to make it to the NFL. We're not going to discount that. We're not going to discredit that. We're going to show some respect to the guys that do make it, whether they make the practice squad or whether they make the active 53-man roster, right? Definitely, one of the best in the country to do that when there's only 32 teams in the NFL. However, having said that, Emmanuel Forbes was probably in no way, shape, or form a first-round draft pick. So, he probably more realistically was like in the third round, probably a good third round, maybe a fourth. But for whatever reason, and maybe they kept saying that they felt he fit the system better than like a Christian Gonzalez, who we could have taken ahead of the Patriots, who didn't fit the system because we ran more of a zone than the man-to-man that Gonzalez was used to. Manuel Forbes is tall, lanky, just basically was Swiss cheese last season. Was thrown up, no fault of his own, maybe a fault of the system, whatever. Unfortunately, had the responsibility of taking on a lot of number one wide receivers last season. AJ Brown, Brandon Ayuk, CeeDee Lamb. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? Which, basically was mean failure. And they kind of hoped that he was going to rebound this season. So far this season, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. He's actually benched about halfway through the game, not necessarily halftime. It was actually right before halftime. So, it'll be interesting to see this week going into the Giants, whether he retains that starting role at cornerback, whether he kind of goes into the rotation at cornerback and secondary. But, that's why I kind of gave it the half. So we still have Davis. We still have Forbes. It's about 1.5 of Ron Rivera's draft picks left in the last 4 years. Excuse me. So when you look at the overall picture, Ron Rivera probably didn't really do anything well for our team from a draft perspective, drafting the best players, drafting good people that, you can build on, not project pieces. The talent evaluation was probably less than probably absolutely downright sucked. But it kind of is what it is. So, where do you go, right? New ownership, new GM, new head coach, start over, erase it. Look, that's why only a third of the team came back from last season. And at the rate we're going, there probably may not even be that many by the end of the season or come, draft day of next year going forward, right? As Dave chimes in, hey, what's going on, Steve? Thanks for checking in, Dave. Great to have you watching, even though you are a Cowboys fan. You can actually check out Dave and Paul every Wednesday night at 9:30. They are the co-host of Them 215 Boys. I'll throw them some love just because they're on the same platform. They put a great show together for the Cowboys if you're a Dallas Silver and Blue fan. But we'll probably just stop about talking about them right now, right? But it's always good to have those guys on. Great for conversation, great for questioning, and we rib each other all the time. As you kind of know, we just had week 1 of the NFL season get underway this past week. A lot of exciting games starting on Thursday night with the opening season between the Kansas City Chiefs, Baltimore Ravens. Carry that into Friday night in Brazil with the Packers and Eagles in substandard field conditions. Roll that right into Sunday and even into last night's, 49ers New York Jets game. Just to see, Aaron Rodgers back, play an entire game, more than 4 snaps. It was pretty action-packed weekend, right? A lot going on, a couple upsets here and there. And, one of the things we've gotten accustomed to, especially during the regular season here at Commanders Gridiron, at some point in time in the show, we kind of recap the game that we just played, and then we'll turn around and look at the preview for the upcoming week, right? So let's start off with the recap for week 1. We took our team from D.C. down to Tampa Bay to Raymond Jones Stadium to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Big Pirate Ship. Unfortunately, we came out on the short end of the stick, losing to Tampa Bay 37-20 to bring our first, new I guess, record under under Dan Quinn, Adam Peters and company to 0-1. But, it's a long season. They're playing 17 games, and that's why we play the game, right? But, when we break down the game, you got to look at the fact that Tampa Bay is a good team. They're above average team. They made the playoffs last season. They got some good skilled players on offense, led by quarterback Baker Mayfield, wide receiver Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin, right? So they're going to be competitive. They're going to be good. When you have areas of concern for positional groups on your team going into the game against those skilled positions, it kind of makes you worry as a fan, right? So we're going to talk about that here in a couple seconds. But let's talk about the things that did go well. Rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels, 17 of 24, 184 yards. Actually led in rushing yards with 88 yards, had 2 rushing touchdowns. And, it was kind of a anomaly, so to speak, but Austin Eckler, who came over in free agency from LA, actually led receiving with 4 receptions for 52 yards. Kind of contrast that to Baker Mayfield. And this is where we're going to talk about, the defensive secondary still being Swiss cheese since last season, and wasn't necessarily really addressed other than the selection of second-round draft pick Mike Sarenstill out of Michigan. Baker Mayfield was 24 for 30 for 289 yards and 4 touchdowns. Yes, 4 touchdowns. Their leading rusher only had 62 yards. That was Bucky Irvin. So, we definitely could stop them on the run. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But, being in an NFL passing league, that's kind of our downfall, right? Is that our secondary just isn't very good. Chris Godwin actually led the Buccaneers for receiving with 8 receptions, 83 yards, and 1 catching touchdown. So, for those of you that watched the game, and I was able to kind of watch along on the team app, at least the scoring play or the play-by-play through that, not necessarily watch the video. It looked pretty promising, at least for the first quarter, because literally it was just a swap back and forth. Look, Tampa Bay went down the field, kicked a 56-yard field goal, 3-0. Hey, a couple drives later, kicked another field goal, now 6-0. So, when it's only 6-0 at the end of the first quarter, new season, new rookie quarterback, new coach, coordinators, like, I'll take it, right? Obviously. But then, of course, Baker Mayfield kind of does what Baker does and, kind of makes Cleveland look crappy now, knowing what Deshaun Watson did in week 1 as well as last year. But Baker, goes and connects with Mike Evans for 17 yards, makes it 13-0, right? Then, lo and behold, Brian Robinson comes in, 7-yard touchdown run. Actually has our kicker, who is no longer with the team, and we'll talk about that in a second, a couple minutes as well. Cade York actually made the extra point after he missed a field goal before. So it's 13-7. So we're staying close, right? Right before halftime. Lo and behold, Tampa kicks another field goal, 16-7 going into half. And when you're only down by 9 at half, especially on the road week 1, still gives you a little life, still gives you a little optimism about your team, about what are things going, how can we continue to get better? Can we make the right adjustments going into the second half? Why is Jaden Daniels running so much? Why does he only have 2.5 seconds to throw the ball? Can our secondary decide to figure out how to plug the Swiss cheese? And, just on and on and on. Can our kicker decide to figure out how to put the ball through the uprights? So, that's why you play 2 halves of football, right? But it's pretty much kind of back and forth for the second half, because then the scoring decides to then each team that figures, hey, we're going to start scoring on each other. So going into the third quarter, Chris Godwin catches that 4-yard pass from Baker, 23-7. Jaden Daniels has his first touchdown run of the year, and actually first touchdown run of his career, to make it 23-14. So we're still in striking distance, still being somewhat competitive. However, then Tampa Bay turns around, scores again, make it 30-14. Unfortunately, and this is where it kind of, became the dagger, fourth quarter-ish. We weren't necessarily as physical as we needed to be. We didn't come out with as much energy as we needed to be, and it kind of showed in the fourth quarter. Tampa Bay ended up scoring again with another Mike Evans touchdown, make it 37-14. So at that point, we're basically kind of getting blown out, but kind of to be expected, with everything going on. Okay. But then at least Jaden Daniels makes it somewhat respectable with another touchdown run, failed 2-point conversion. So you get to the final score of 37-20. What is kind of interesting, though, is, basically the stats from the game, right? So Tampa Bay put up 392 total yards to our 299. Let's just call it 300. 300 isn't bad. However, when 138 of those yards are rushing, and we should be doing like 300 yards alone of passing, then it does kind of make you concerned for what you saw on the field during that game, right? Because we only did have 161 yards passing. Now, the good news is we only kept Tampa Bay just over 100 yards of rushing, which we seemed to do a good bit last year with a lot of teams, and keeping them around 100 or under 100 yards rushing. But then, like I said, the secondary would be Swiss cheese, and we'd be giving up play after play through the air like it was going out of style. And, we gave them 280 yards of passing. So basically that correlated to, giving up 6.4 yards per play to Tampa Bay to our 5.3. Touchdowns. First downs were dead even at 22. Third down efficiency, and this is what killed us. One of the things that Dan Quinn talked about in his post-game presser, among many things in his 20, 25 minutes. Something he thought was kind of a dreadful thing, so to speak, was getting off the field on third down and that third down efficiency, right? So obviously Tampa Bay was 9 out of 13. We had a really good opportunity to get them off the field, and I don't think it was necessarily 3 and out on the first drive, but on a second series of downs that they had, we had a 15-yard penalty, on third down, which basically, gives it an automatic first down and continues their drive, but we could have got off the field, made them punt, momentum swing, right? But it's super interesting that, penalties, okay, whatever. One of the things that did kind of peak up, even though Jaden Daniels only had about 2.5 to 3 seconds to throw, was the fact that, we only let 2 sacks up. People were trashing the offense. One of the things we did right before week 1 was sign right tackle Sam Cosmi to a contract extension, and kind of showed in week 1, right? For a bunch of new guys, including a new center, new guard, as well as a couple, returning guys, trying to get that chemistry of that such ever important and vital group is so hard to do. And for them to only give up 2 sacks in week 1 is kind of great. Now, I get it. Tampa Bay might not be, the best defense that we're going to see this season. But, when we were leading the NFL up until week 16 last year of sacking Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett, starting off the season with only 2 for the first game, if we can continue that trend or keep it less than 2, I'll be super happy. And even in the grand scheme of things, Tress Way only had to punt 3 times. We did have 7 penalties, a little high. The other big thing that I was super happy of, because people were always there's nothing to be happy about our offense or even our team's performance. And I'm like, well, yeah, we lost 37-20. 2 things that I take away out of this, right? We had a way more balanced offense than what we did entire last season, right? Under Eric Bieniemy. Was our passing the greatest? No. Obviously you want to have that passing yards way higher, but the plays, runs versus pass, were pretty close to being balanced. The other thing we did was JD went in there and managed the game and protected the ball. No interceptions, no fumbles lost on the offense, whether it was, JD5 or, one of the running backs or, B-Rob or one of the wide receivers. So no turnovers. I will take that any day of the week. In fact, if you can give me 17 weeks of that, which is not going to happen, but it's wishful thinking, it's certainly something that, hey, it gives us something to build on and something to look forward to, and keep working the system. So, in looking at the Tampa Bay game, obviously, we know our secondary is trash. How they can kind of continue to address that, yeah, I don't know if you really can. There's still a couple good guys out there on the free agent market that I think that even if you brought them in, could learn the system really quick, have the natural athletic ability that could still be effective and be better than what we currently have, right? At least one, maybe two. It's just a matter of whether they want to pull the trigger. Second, a lot of complaints about the defensive line, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Newton, stuff like that. And while they had a decent amount of pressures, while they had I think they only had one sack for the day, maybe two. They had some opportunities where they had guys wrapped for tackles, wrapped for losses, and for whatever reason, the guys got out. The Buccaneers got out of it. But also hand in hand, right? That when you're going to get better production out of your front six, front seven, is when the back 4 and 5 are playing a lot better, right? When they're being able to cover guys, when you get those coverage sacks, when they're making Baker throw it out of bounds because he doesn't have an option and he doesn't want to take a sack, or when he tries to scramble and we got it covered or whatever. But when the back end isn't matching the effort and productivity of the front end, then you're going to have problems. The other big thing that came to kill us, we left 7 points on the board and a lot of field momentum and a lot of field possession changes and field positioning on the field, right? By kicking. Cade York, who was, man, I kind of feel bad for the dude. They brought him in. So long story short, we signed McManus. McManus was going to be really good. McManus got hit with a sexual assault lawsuit back in May, I think, right after the draft, and the team released him. So then they were kind of scrambling to do kickers. Joey Slide already signed a free agent deal with New England, so he couldn't bring him back to kick like he did for us the last couple of years. So they ended up signing Cade York. Cade York comes in, missed the first field goal, misses the second field goal, made an extra point, missed an extra point. And like I said, when you take the field position, give that to the opposing team so early in a game, it is such a momentum killer. And then when you do it twice, it's kind of demoralizing, right? To the point that, there's such a swing in energy and production and momentum. And, the fact that, when you send your kicker out onto the field, you're hoping that, hey, man, it should be an automatic 3 points every time. And, as long as it's not windy or raining or, 62 yards plus or whatever. Like if I send my kicker out there, bam, it's going through, or at least, unless something fluky happens, shanks it a little, hooks it a little, like it's going in. We couldn't do that. So they actually ended up cutting him yesterday, signing another guy. We're going to talk about it in a little bit and go from there. But, overall for the first game, I think we did fairly well. Definitely a lot of stuff that, to work on. Definitely some stuff to build upon. Definitely some things that we can expand upon to get better, to learn from, watch that film. Some big takeaways from week 1 against Tampa Bay. Jaden Daniels is a baller. Somebody's got to teach him how to slide. If you watch Hard Knocks with the Chicago Bears, maybe you got to bust out the slippy slide for Jaden. I'm not sure, but, the worst thing, and it was kind of referenced a lot on social media over the last week, was they saw a lot of similarities to him and RG3 in their rookie season. And we know what happened to RG3. Hopefully it doesn't happen to Jaden. So somebody better teach that boy how to slide. We need to find a way to get our wide receivers involved early. Besides Terry, we talked about that earlier when they traded away Jahan Dotson, that, hey, look, we know the wide receiver core isn't great. We basically have number 2s and less, right? Little experience, not a lot of proficiency. But, I don't know if that was Kingsbury being conservative because it's week 1, But, we got to start doing some pre-snap motions. We got to start doing some misdirections. We got to start doing some more intricate crossing routes, trying to create space and make room for our wide receivers and stuff like that. So I think it's going to come between the quarterback that we have and the offensive coordinator. But, it's just some stuff over the top that, you kind of see and be like, hey, man, there's still room for improvement. The defense is better this year overall, but still needs a lot of work. And it kind of starts with, the linebacking group was better because, we picked up Louvu, we picked up Wagner, even though KJ Henry went and signed a free agent deal after he got cut with the Cincinnati Bengals. We still got Jamin Davis. We still got a couple other guys, right? That, as long as we can somehow figure out how to tighten up or add to the back end of the defense, we'll be fine. So it'll be super interesting. Just some crazy stuff that I always throw at you every week from Next Gen Stats. Jaden Daniels scrambled on 23.5% of his dropbacks versus the Buccaneers, the sixth highest rate of any quarterback in a single game since 2022, with a minimum of 10, right? So, and then basically, when we look at it, what was they talked about, the kicker situation in Cade York, they talked about Dan Quinn basically alluded to it in his post-game presser that they were going to be, evaluating whether they keep him or not. They were talking about, and everybody kind of knew that, hey, look, the kicker's not going to be around. Like, how can you go further on into the season after the kicker basically blew such a momentum swing, at least twice with missed field goals, maybe even a third time in the missed extra point. So it's kind of just something that, you're like, wow, I don't know if you can really recover from that, from him being on the team, moving forward, or if you basically just cut your losses and kind of go from there. So before we keep talking about JD5 and next week's preview, let's take a quick second and talk about our sponsors here at Out of the Box Sports, starting with Jason Fine, aka Attorney Big Al, specializing in motor vehicle accidents, slips and falls, workers' compensation, personal injury claims. You can reach Jason at 1-800-HURT-123. He has 3 convenient office locations throughout Pennsylvania and New Jersey, in Philadelphia, PA, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and Pittsburgh, PA. If you're looking for legal counsel, legal representation, give Jason Fine, aka Attorney Big Al, a call. Remember, if you don't win, he doesn't collect. Great guy, friend of the show, great legal representation. Give him a call. Tell him you heard about him on our show or any of the other shows at Out of the Box Sports, and he'll hook you up. That's Jason Fine, a.k.a. Attorney Big Al, at 1-800-HURT-123. Secondly, and last but not least, here at Out of the Box Sports Entertainment, we have a show every night, every day of the week for any sports fan. We have 6 NFL shows, starting with the Silver and Black Raiders on Mondays, hosted by Ken. Monday night, the Salt Lake Squad, where they talk all things Philly, but you can find your Philly Eagles connection there at 6 p.m. Tuesday nights, you can find us, Commanders Gridiron, almost every week throughout the regular season at 8:30. Wednesday, we kind of talked about it a little earlier, but them 215 boys for your Dallas Cowboy fans at 9:30 on Wednesday nights. Thursday, our weekly NFL Pick'em show hosted by Dan and Paul at 6 p.m. And then Friday, the Big Blue Power Hour at 8 p.m. We have all kinds of other shows as well. We have wrestling, baseball, college football frenzy as well. So, and as always, if you're looking to start a show, have a desire to talk about your team or any kind of sports topics, message one of the show hosts or give a shout out to Out of the Box Sports. We'll hook you up. We'll tell you what you need to do. And trust me, it's not very hard to sit here for an hour every week and talk about your favorite team while you're on camera. So check us out of the Box Sports Network. Give us a like, give us a follow, and subscribe at all the major media outlets: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. All right. As we talk about the second half of the show for about the next 15, 20 minutes, one of the things that we kind of always do after we talk about where we've been is kind of like where we're going, right? Um, and week 2 is kind of our home is our home opener. It's not kind of is our home opener against the New York Giants, who went 0-1 this past weekend. So, it's super interesting in looking at the game because you kind of didn't know what the expectations were for the Giants going into the season. Obviously, everybody knows they traded away Saquon Barkley. All right, let's get it out of the way. Let's throw our shade at the New York Giants and Daniel Jones. Saquon Barkley, as a member of the Philadelphia Eagles in 2024, now has more touchdowns individually than Daniel Jones has throwing touchdowns for the New York Giants, 3-2. Daniel Jones, since signing his new 4-year, $140 million, $120 million deal extension, has now thrown more pick sixes than he has thrown touchdown passes to his own receivers. So the big question was, is that going to carry over into the 2024 season? And unfortunately, it kind of looks like it has, right? So, there's a lot of questions to be answered up there in New York in that market with the Giants. They lost to the Minnesota Vikings under quarterback Sam Darnold, 28-6, which basically came at the hands of 2 field goals for the New York Giants. Daniel Jones was able, to go 42 for 186 and 2 interceptions. Devin Singletary led the team in rushing, 10 carries, 37 yards, and rookie Malik Neighbors had 66 yards receiving, which is kind of to be expected between that running back, that receiver to be the top on the team in those 2 categories, respectively. So when you break it down, the New York Giants only had 240 yards of receiving, 166 yards of passing, and 74 yards rushing. So what you kind of like to see in that is it's under 100 yards rushing, which the Washington Commanders can do, right? Hold you under or right around 100 yards rushing. They were only at 166 yards passing, which was only a little bit less than where we were at against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But, it's kind of is what it is, right? It's the New York Giants. They put together 14 first downs, only made just under 50% of their third downs efficiency, were 33% on fourth downs, 1 of 3. Allowed 5 sacks, which kind of sounds like a role reversal between our Commanders of 2023 and what we did this year. So maybe that might be a promising thing for us. They had 9 penalties, and then, of course, they had 2 turnovers, which were the interceptions thrown by Daniel Jones. So what do we think about going into week 2, right? Off the cuff, it looks like we're the better team on paper, and we're the better team on the field in week 2. However, I'm going to preface that by saying that the New York Giants, for whatever reason, always find a way, home or away, the 2 games that they play us interdivisionally, find a way to play us really tough, play us like it's their Super Bowl, and play like basically out of their minds. We basically make them look like a playoff team every time we play them. I don't know why. I'm hoping it's going to be different since Ron Rivera is not there this year. We have a new head coach. We have some new coordinators. We have JD. But knowing that our secondary is still Swiss cheese, we signed a new kicker who's hopefully better than the week 1 kicker. And we're not 100% sold on the wide receiver room of our team, what that's going to look like on Sunday. What I can tell you is going to happen on Sunday is Jaden's going to basically go crazy on Sunday. Hopefully not as many runs, but still be as productive in the running, if that makes sense. More efficient, more effective in the passing, but not necessarily more passing than what we did in week 1. Follow me? Clear as mud? All right, let's keep going. Can the secondary tighten up at home? It's a home opener. It's the first home game under Dan Quinn, Adam Peters and company, right? First home game for the new roster. First home game for them to prove something. So I think you're going to see an improved team even against a hard divisional opponent in the New York Giants. Now, you may be laughing when I say a hard New York Giants. And it kind of goes back to what we just talked about 60 seconds ago, that for whatever reason, The Giants always bring their AAA game against us when they should be playing their D game, right? But I think there's going to be a couple keys to us in week 2. Can we get to Daniel Jones? If we can get at least the same 5 sacks or more, we win. Can we create some turnovers? If we can get at least one interception and or one more interception or fumble, we win the game. Can our secondary figure out how to play secondary, keep Malik Neighbors to less than 100 yards receiving, along with Hyatt and the other guys that they have up there, we win the game. Can the new kicker show up, make his kicks, make his extra points, throw in a field goal here and there because we're going to need him to, we win the game. So there's a lot of caveats, a lot of conditions to us winning the game, but I don't see us going 0-2, especially at a home opener with these guys here, right? I'm never one to say that we usually typically sweep a divisional series when I'm doing season predictions or stuff like that. And I kind of feel the same way, right? So that, look, like I never predict us to go 2-0 against the Eagles, the Cowboys, or even the Giants. But you hope that you can at least split the divisional series against your divisional opponents, whether it's you win at home or you win it away, and then you split the series, right? And I think that's what we're going to do. I think we're going to win this game. Now, it might be enough that when we see the Giants later on in the season and they can get, better or make personnel changes to be better, it might be a different story. But I think going into week 2, we're going to come out on top. I think we're going to score probably above what we did last week, right? In the 20 points. So if that's kind of the benchmark and we weren't really that efficient on offense, then, hey, let's be honest. The Giants are going to score points. It's kind of just the way we are. Every team's going to score points on us. It's just a matter of, can we not let it get as high as what it was last year to overcome that? Because it dug us a hole so bad that then EB's offense had to basically become one-sided, which defenses fed off because they knew we weren't going to run the ball. All we were going to do is pass to try and catch back up. So now that we kind of have that more balanced offense between JD as quarterback, B-Rob, Eckler at running back, and throw in a hodgepodge of wide receivers and tight ends, I think we'll do just fine. So, off the cuff, when you kind of look at it right here, let's call it a Washington victory over the Giants, 34-24, right? Let's go 34-24. Commanders. Check in next week. We'll see how close we are. Hopefully, we pulled out the dub. And we'll go from there. As I kept alluding to earlier, one of the things that we did, we got rid of our kicker, Cade York, who basically blew his career in week 1. Bunch of missed field goals, missed extra point, whatever. But then, we turned around and signed veteran kicker, who I think last played for the Cleveland Browns. His name is Austin Seibert. It's a quick pivot after the Sunday struggles of Cade York, who was released actually yesterday. And then they signed Seibert actually this morning, I think it was. And then basically, to help promote our week 1 to 2 transition and the offense that we have and kind of the improvement that we need to make, right? Let's keep this in mind. Jaden Daniels faced 5+ rushers on 47.1% of his dropbacks, the second highest in week 1 against Tampa Bay. That was reported per Next Gen Stats. He was pressured on 38% of his dropbacks, and his average time to throw was 2.35 seconds, the fastest time in week 1. So, what does that mean? That basically he had the least amount of time in week 1 out of any quarterback in the NFL to throw the ball at 2.35 seconds. While that is a super, super short amount of time, you think about it. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, I got to throw the ball or run. We only gave up 2 sacks last week. So, hopefully we can get him another second and a half, maybe a little bit longer time to throw. But hey man, I hope I'm not going to sit here again next week and say Jaden Daniels only had 2.35 seconds to throw again. We can't go through 2 weeks in a row of that. So they got to find a way, make the adjustments, put some new blocking packages, schemes in there that can buy the kid some more time to pass. Plain and simple, right? Week 2 depth chart came out this morning. Not a whole lot of surprises, other than there's a couple, right? So let's just call it as it is. Terry McLaurin and Noah Brown basically start as the outside number 1 wide receivers, and we'll just kind of work our way through the offensive across the offense, right? Starting left tackle is now going to be Brandon Coleman. They kind of did this tackle by committee thing in week 1. A lot of fans didn't understand it because you're trying to build some chemistry, blah 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 blah, with the offensive line, which I won't argue against. But if you're still trying to evaluate, keep guys healthy, by committee isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing. Follow me? All right. So Brandon Coleman gets the nod at left tackle. Allegretti, starting left guard, no there. Biades, no change. Cosme, no change. Wiley, right tackle, no change. Zach Ertz, no change, right? One change that I think kind of happened, or is kind of just something to keep an eye on. Ben Sinnott, rookie out of Kansas, great kid. Now coming in at number 3 for tight ends, but for the amount that we use our tight ends to rotate him through, he's still going to get some time behind Zach Ertz and John Bates. But those 2 guys are going to be the primaries, right? Where you kind of see some changes or some additions is the 3rd wide receiver is now going to be Luke McCaffrey ahead of Diami Brown on the depth chart. So it kind of shows the decent game that he had in week 1 versus the training camp. Really good production and growth in training camp to kind of give him that bolster. And especially now that Dotson's gone, it helps him further get up the depth chart. Marcus Mariota is hurt. So to cover the 3rd quarterback spot, it's going to be JD5, Jeff Driscoll, and Sam Hartman, quarterback out of Notre Dame, who was signed to the practice squad, got elevated and activated for last week's game to the 53-man roster. No change on the running backs. Defensively, one of the big changes was just the fact that right now one of the starting quarterbacks is Mike Samerstill, second round rookie out of Michigan. The big one that kind of remains to be seen is whether Emmanuel Forbes is going to start this week or he's going to get swapped out from Michael Davis or Noah Igbinoghene. There's a very good chance that either of those 2 latter guys get the nod ahead of Forbes going into week 2 against the Giants. Lord knows we're going to need it, right? In 7 games against Washington, keep this in mind, Daniel Jones has completed 70% of his passes with 10 touchdowns against 3 interceptions. It's once again unbelievable to think what he does against Washington compared to the rest of the NFL. Which kind of goes back to what we talked about, right? That like when he plays us, whether it's home or at MetLife Stadium, we make him look like a Pro Bowl quarterback. So, are they going to continue to do that, or are they going to, end up resorting to old Tommy DeVito coming in and torturing us as well? Who knows? We'll see, right? Should be a good game all around. Last but not least, and we talked about it in the intro under new, and then, talking about our games and stuff. And I kind of saved it for last before we close here. The Washington Commanders came out a week and a half ago, right before the week leading into week 1, and basically said that the Washington Commanders have removed the Sean Taylor. They called it the installation. It's not called a statue. It's not called a memorial. Maybe you call it a memorial. Who knows? The installation at the stadium, at Northwest Stadium, and are working with Taylor's family on a new statue to honor the late great safety Sean Taylor. Fans applauded this move. As you remember or may remember, the horrendous installation that was created for Sean Taylor. where to begin, right? So apparently, allegedly, from sources, um, there was input from the family, especially the one daughter, for the design of that installation. Nobody's really sure if that was 100% factual or if that ended up being just kind of like the way out the team used under Snyder and Jason Wright, to cover how bad it was, right? Um, and then to go a step further, they were trying to mimic, let's call it mimic, the uniform presentation from Sean Taylor's playing career, which was like 3.5 years, right? From 04 to 07. So there were a lot of things wrong with the uniform collection put on the installation. So let's be honest, like the team has so much access to seasonal uniforms, it's not funny. So look, if you want to put together a uniform for Sean from 2004, 2005, a throwback uniform, even in 7 when he passed away, like there's enough stuff, even though it may not have been his game worn stuff, excuse me, to and appropriately put that together. So, like and I'm just going to throw out some examples and they may not be 100% accurate, but let's just say like the cleats weren't from that era or the jersey didn't match the pants for that season. And, the helmet was a helmet that Sean never even would have worn. You know, Sean always had the iconic tape in like 20 different spots around his face mask. Like why wouldn't you tape up the face mask to reflect what he wore, even if that wasn't one of his game helmets or, stuff like that, right? So like if you're gonna do it, like kind of do it accurately, right? Let's be honest. So, so the team basically put out a statement about the new. And let's be honest, I think they haven't put out any renderings, haven't put out any drawings, or hey, this is what we want to do. But there's a lot of speculation, good speculation, that's basically going to be like a bronze statue of Sean Taylor outside of Northwest Stadium. So the Commanders said, after careful consideration, we have decided as an organization to remove the Sean Taylor installation from Commanders Field. This was just prior to them announcing Northwest Stadium. We realized that the installation fell short in honoring one of our franchise's most iconic players. Together with the Taylor family, we are working on a plan which includes unveiling a statue that will rightfully celebrate the legacy and impact that Sean had on our organization, the fan base, and the community. The Washington Commanders are committed to honoring our legends in a first-class manner. From the statement from Jackie Taylor, who was the daughter, who's kind of been on the forefront of the whole Sean Taylor thing, said, I'm excited to announce, along with the Washington Commanders, plans to unveil a statue to honor my dad. I'm thankful for Josh Harris and the Commanders family for their continued commitment to keep my dad's legacy alive. I look forward to sharing plans in the future and learning more about my dad through this process. I'm forever grateful for the outpouring of love and support from this special fan base. And, like I said, it's something that should have been done a long time ago, but it's just one of those things that somewhere on the pecking order, it has to fall. And hey, it's now time. Let's cross that off the list. Let's make it right. Put things in the way they should be and kind of move on. Right. So I think at some point in time, probably not this season, but next season, you're going to see basically a bronze statue unveiled somewhere on a concourse of Sean Taylor, and rightfully so. And, something that should have been done the right way by the Snyder era, last year, 2 years ago, right, when they did this debacle. But it kind of is what it is. So having said all of that, that brings our show to a close tonight. Now that we are fully into the swing of the NFL season, Commanders Gridiron will be on every Tuesday night, with the exception of every third, only because I'm at the Firehouse every third Tuesday. So we will take off every third Tuesday, but 2 out of every 3, you can check back in on Tuesday nights at 8:30 here at Out of the Box Sports to watch your favorite NFL show, Commanders Gridiron. Next Tuesday, I will actually be in South Carolina, weather dependent. If we have good weather, the show will not be on. I will actually be golfing at the Ocean Course at Kiowa Island. If it's projected rain, which it is right now, we will go remote and have a show of the Commander's Gridiron, even if it is abbreviated, on the 17th. If we are away and can't broadcast next week, our next scheduled appearance will be on the 1st of October, because the 24th is actually a work day for me at the firehouse. I'm going to try and sneak in an episode somewhere between then, because that will be just too long, too many games to recap, and probably too much news to go over. But to follow along, follow our page, the team page, follow the Out of the Box Sports page, follow the Commander's Gridiron page, as well as my social media, and we'll keep you updated with the dates and times of the shows. And until then, be a friend, tell a friend, like, follow, and subscribe the show and Out of the Box Sports Network for your favorite sports content. Have a good evening. I'm signing off. Until the next time, take care of yourself.